The residents of Cedar Ridge called it an act of mercy, but Anna Whitmore understood the truth. This was her exile. Standing on the weathered planks of the boarding house veranda that crisp, dusty dawn in 1873, she felt like a performer thrust onto an unwanted stage. Eyes watched from storefronts, behind delicate window coverings, and through grimy tavern glass. Everyone had come to witness her departure, the childless widow, too burdensome for relatives, too scandalous for respectable company. Her worn travel satchel rested beside her feet, its leather handle polished smooth by anxious hands. Within lay garments mended countless times until they resembled patchwork, a weathered scripture book, and precious keepsakes from her deceased husband's belongings. Her entire life compressed into one modest bag, yet it seemed to weigh like lead. "Better step inside, Martha," her sister-in-law pressed once more. Though not harsh, her tone carried that familiar note of sympathy Anna had learned to despise. "No," Anna replied firmly. "I'll remain out here." Her brother Samuel fidgeted, nearby, unable to meet her gaze. "You must realize this serves everyone's interest. Martha's with child again. We already feed 4 mouths. I comprehend perfectly," Anna interrupted. Her voice held steady. Months of hushed conversations had steeled her resolve. They branded her childless. They deemed her cursed. They considered her a disgrace. Every cruel term whispered behind closed doors had reached her ears. Samuel adjusted his jacket. "Monroe's an honorable fellow. Tragedy took his loved ones years ago. He requires household assistance." Anna nearly scoffed at the bitter twist of fate. Jack Monroe, the hermit who visited town twice annually for provisions before vanishing again. The man who had entombed himself on a distant ranch 20 miles away. Fever had claimed his wife and boy. He didn't seek a servant. He sought to bury his grief, and she represented their solution to his torment. The church women had orchestrated this cleverly. "Match the infertile woman with the reclusive rancher," they'd murmured. 2 outcasts hidden where society needn't acknowledge them. Anna glanced toward the general store. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Clark stood united, gossiping behind their gloves. They looked away when caught staring, but Anna glimpsed their self-satisfied expressions. "He wasn't informed, was he?" she questioned, quietly, fixing Samuel with her stare. Samuel coughed nervously. "Immaterial. The man requires domestic help. You need shelter. Nothing more complicated." Nothing more complicated. Wagon wheels groaning shattered the tense quiet. Old Pete Sullivan pulled up before the boarding house, his expression carefully neutral. He touched his hat brim while avoiding her eyes. Even he had come to observe this cruel jest unfold. "Good morning, Miss Anna," Pete offered. Anna raised her head proudly and climbed aboard. Her spine remained erect, despite humiliation weighing on her like granite. As the wagon jerked into motion, a child's voice carried from behind. "Mama, why is Miss Anna departing?" Young Tommy Henderson wondered. "She's bound for her proper place," came the answer. Those words pursued her down the dusty thoroughfare, beyond the chapel where she'd once stood as a hopeful bride, beyond the graveyard where her husband rested. When Cedar Ridge faded into the distance, she felt exposed as the wind-battered trees scattered across the plains. Pete attempted casual conversation about pleasant traveling weather. "Indeed," she responded, though she hadn't noticed. Her thoughts raced ahead to an isolated ranch where a grieving man would inherit her burden, a barren widow dispatched as punishment, wrapped in false kindness. Hours crawled by. Storm clouds massed overhead until the heavens erupted with thunder. Rain hammered them, transforming the path into mire. When they reached the fork in the trail, both travelers were drenched completely. "My journey ends here," Pete announced, halting at a deteriorating gate. "The dwelling lies up that track." For the first time that day, he looked directly at her, his aged eyes gentler now. "Are you certain about this choice, Miss Anna? I could inform folks you traveled eastward instead." Anna clutched her bag more tightly. "I have nobody waiting in the east. I appreciate your concern, Pete, but this is my destined path." He nodded, clicked to his horses, and the wagon departed, abandoning her in the mud with only her belongings and a trunk too cumbersome to manage alone. The mile-long trek seemed eternal. Prairie grass swept her skirts. The sky hung low, thick with the aroma of damp soil. By the time the ranch appeared, Anna's clothing clung damply to her frame, her hair hanging in sodden ribbons. The dwelling emerged from the grassland like a specter, its timber walls weathered gray. A barn tilted against the skyline and wisps of smoke drifted from the chimney. It resembled less a home than a structure awaiting collapse. The porch boards protested under her weight as she approached. Before her knuckles met wood, the door swung open. Jack Monroe dominated the doorway, tall and powerfully built, dark hair streaked with silver. His eyes stopped her breath, steel gray like winter clouds and equally vacant. "You must be the woman from town," he stated flatly. "Anna Whitmore," she responded, lifting her chin as water dripped from her locks. He assessed her from head to toe, his expression unreadable. "You're behind schedule. Where's your chest?" "Near the entrance. Too heavy to carry." Without another syllable, he stepped past her, striding down the muddy trail. Minutes later, he returned, the trunk balanced effortlessly on one shoulder. He placed it down carefully, then retreated. "Best come inside," he said. "The storm hasn't finished yet." The house stood empty, dust coating every surface. The atmosphere carried faint traces of ash and isolation. Jack gestured down a narrow corridor. "Your quarters are at the far end. Previously my wife's needlework room. Cleared it out yesterday." Anna hesitated, her heart constricting. "Thank you." He offered no reply, simply busied himself at the cooking stove. Alone in the small chamber, Anna changed into dry garments. The bed was cramped, the window overlooking boundless prairie. A room emptied of one woman's aspirations, now intended to house another's banishment. When she emerged, a plate awaited on the table, beans, cornbread, salted meat. Jack consumed his own meal outside on the porch, leaving her alone with the tempest and her reflections. She cleaned the dishes afterward, hands moving in silence. Jack returned inside, carrying the scent of rain. He leaned against the doorframe. "We must establish understanding," he said. "This isn't matrimony. I required assistance. You needed accommodation. That's the extent of this arrangement." "I understand completely," Anna replied, her voice unwavering. He studied her momentarily, those gray eyes sharp and inscrutable. "Then we're in agreement." Later, when the house lay dark and the storm raged beyond the walls, Anna remained wakeful, listening to wind through the rafters. The town believed they had finished her, that they'd buried her shame beside a man with nothing left to offer. But storms possessed a way of reshaping the landscape, creating new passages where none previously existed, and Anna Whitmore was far from defeated. The initial weeks at Monroe Ranch challenged every fiber of Anna's endurance. Dawn arrived mercilessly early, the prairie sky bleeding pale before the rooster stirred. Jack rose wordlessly, pulling on his boots and heading to the barn. Anna heard the door's protest, the steady cadence of his steps disappearing into the fields. He never waited for morning meals. He never waited for anything. She occupied her mornings with labor, scouring floors untouched by water for years, coaxing the stove to life, wrestling weeds from the neglected garden plot. Her fingers developed calluses, her back protested, but she welcomed the discomfort. Better to feel physical pain than emotional anguish. Jack maintained his distance, consuming half his meals on the porch, as though her presence reopened wounds that had never properly healed. When he spoke, it was merely to issue instructions: where to stack firewood, which tools belonged where, what day's laundry should be completed. Anna complied, but she wasn't submissive. Once, when he declared the garden land too damaged for cultivation, she lifted her chin defiantly. "So am I. Yet here I remain." Then she resumed turning soil. By late September, determined green sprouts pushed through the earth. The sight made her throat tighten. Life could flourish even in abandoned places. One cool morning she discovered the garden fence repaired. The post stood upright, wire stretched taut. Jack hadn't mentioned the work, but she recognized his craftsmanship. A wordless peace offering, she reciprocated in her own fashion. The barn, once chaotic with scattered implements and forgotten tack, became organized under her care. Everything found its proper place again. When Jack noticed, he offered no thanks. But the following morning, she found a small bundle of wild herbs on the table, seasoning for her cooking, gathered from somewhere on the range. It wasn't conversation, but it represented progress. The genuine transformation came with the first frost. Anna awoke to visible breath in the cold, frost painting delicate patterns on her window. She hurried to the main room to find Jack already hauling firewood, his face set against the biting wind. "Winter's going to be harsh," he muttered. "Must drive the cattle southward today, closer to shelter." "I'll assist," she declared. He turned, surprise crossing his features. "Can you ride adequately?" That afternoon, Anna found herself astride a reliable mare named Buttercup. Her skirts tucked awkwardly around the saddle. 30 head of cattle spread before them, their breath steaming in the frigid air. The work proved brutal, cold penetrating her bones. But when a young steer broke from the herd, instinct guided her. She wheeled Buttercup around, driving it back into formation with practiced skill. Jack observed, eyes squinted against the wind. "You ride far better than adequately." "My father bred horses," Anna explained simply. "I was raised in the saddle." For the first time, his mouth curved upward. Not quite a smile, but approaching one. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Her chest warmed in a way unrelated to physical exertion. That evening, after settling the herd, the blizzard struck. Snow assaulted the ranch, accumulating against the walls, shrieking down the chimney. Anna shivered beside the fire, her thin blanket inadequate against the chill. Jack studied her extensively, then added another log to the flames. "No point in freezing in separate rooms. We'll sleep here by the fire." They prepared 2 bedrolls on opposite sides of the hearth, maintaining propriety. But as the storm intensified, the silence between them fractured. Jack spoke first, voice subdued. "Sarah cherished storms, said they proved God still moved through the world. Me? I only hear what I've lost." Anna listened, her heart aching. "I understand something about loss." She shared Thomas's story about the physician's gentle words that transformed her from wife to pariah. "They labeled me Barren, as if that defined my entire being." Jack regarded her across the flames. "That doesn't diminish your worth as a woman. Sarah suffered losses too before Tim arrived. Nearly destroyed her both times, but it didn't alter who she was." Anna blinked hard, tears stinging unexpectedly. No one had ever spoken such words to her. "What creates wholeness in a person?" she asked softly. Jack's gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. "Loving something enough to persevere. Meaningful work. Perhaps someone to share the burden." The storm howled outside, but within the small circle of firelight, something delicate awakened. Trust, perhaps, or the first tender shoots of something. Neither dared acknowledge. When morning arrived, the storm had passed. The world lay buried beneath pristine snow, sparkling under the rising sun. Jack poured her coffee from the pot he'd kept warm on the stove. His hand brushed hers during the exchange. Neither withdrew. "The northern fence is damaged," he said gruffly. "We'll repair it together after breakfast." Anna nodded. "Together." He repeated the word as if testing it, then gave a single nod. And in that small, quiet agreement, something fundamental shifted. Between them. No longer strangers bound by arrangement, but partners standing united against an unforgiving land. February delivered a savage wind that infiltrated every crack in the walls. Days merged into endless toil, each dawn a struggle against cold and hunger. But even as the world outside froze, something within the Monroe house began to thaw. Jack conversed more frequently now, sometimes recounting Missouri tales, sometimes inquiring about her boarding house existence. Anna responded honestly but cautiously, unwilling to disturb the fragile peace they'd constructed. Still, the gap between them narrowed slowly, carefully. They were learning to share the load. Then came the gentle rap at the door. Nearly lost, against the storm's roar. Anna opened it to discover a young woman wavering on the porch, her face ashen, clutching a bundle against her breast. Before Anna could speak, the stranger collapsed into her arms. Inside the bundle, an infant whimpered. Jack rushed from the barn at the sound, freezing at the sight of Anna cradling the child. The young woman, fever blazing in her eyes, whispered her name, Rose Sullivan, and pleaded with them to care for her baby, William. For 3 days, Anna tended her, but the illness proved too powerful. Rose died at sunrise, her final smile intended for her son. They laid her to rest on the hill behind the house, the wooden marker stark against the snow. Anna stood at the grave, William nestled in her arms, her childless heart aching with new, impossible love. Jack placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "He requires a home," he said simply, "and we have one." The following weeks transformed everything. William cried through nights and demanded constant attention. Anna, who had believed she'd never experience motherhood, found herself rocking him by lamplight, humming half-remembered lullabies, her heart expanding wider each day. Jack amazed her with his gentleness, cradling the boy against his broad chest, speaking softly of livestock and weather as if the child comprehended every word. "He's an excellent listener," Jack remarked one evening, and Anna laughed for the first time in months. The judge in Cedar Ridge formalized the adoption. On paper, William belonged to them. But truly he had belonged from the moment Rose placed him in Anna's arms. Still, rumors circulated in town. Women gossiped about how convenient it was, the infertile bride suddenly with a child. Anna endured their stares silently, but Jack proved less tolerant. Once, when Mrs. Henderson insinuated too harshly, Jack's jaw hardened like stone. "This is my family," he declared in a voice that permitted no argument. "Anyone who objects can address their concerns with me directly." Afterward, the gossip diminished, but trouble arrived from beyond Cedar Ridge. One spring morning, an elegant carriage appeared, polished and refined, misplaced on the muddy track. From it emerged Charles Hartley, a man too polished for honest labor. He claimed William as his son, brandishing documents and promising wealth. "I can provide opportunities you cannot," he told them. "Education, position, a legitimate name." Jack's voice turned steely. "He has a name, William Monroe, and he has a home." The battle moved to the courthouse. The entire town attended. Hartley's attorney painted visions of privilege while Jack and Anna's supporters testified about love, sacrifice, and second chances. Then came the revelation that sealed Hartley's defeat. The Reverend presented evidence that Hartley already maintained a wife and children back east. His interest in William wasn't paternal. It concerned inheritance, greed. The judge's gavel fell. The adoption stands. William Monroe remains with Jack and Anna Monroe. Relief flooded through Anna like a tide. Jack's arm encircled her, strong and reassuring. William, babbling in her lap, clapped his tiny hands as if celebrating his own triumph. That summer, Jack and Anna wed properly before God and neighbors, with William watching from Mrs. Morrison's embrace. Anna wore blue. Jack appeared 10 years younger, and when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer rattled the rafters. The town that once pitied Anna now respected her. The infertile bride had become a mother, a wife, and part of a family that had weathered storms and trials to claim their rightful place. On the porch that night, William sleeping between them, Jack took Anna's hand. "It began as their cruel jest, sending you here," he said. "But look at what we've become." Anna leaned against him, her heart overflowing. "Some jests," she whispered, "proved to be blessings in disguise." Jack kissed her hair, his voice low and certain. "We're no longer broken, Anna. We're complete because we chose to be." And under the vast Wyoming sky, with the prairie stretching endlessly before them, Anna knew he spoke truth. The barren bride, the solitary cowboy, the orphaned child, 3 damaged pieces that had interlocked to form a family stronger than any whisper or tempest. The West had its own standards for measuring a person's value.